Hello. Welcome to the End of Seeking podcast, episode 10.
We got there quickly.
We got there quickly, yeah. This was it's a bit of an unusual week. Last week we took our time to get an episode out, and so it didn't get released on, Wednesday, Thursday, and ended up on Sunday. And now we're 3 days later. Well, it depends when we release it. It'll probably be today, Wednesday. If not, tomorrow, Thursday.
Yeah, because we realised that if we didn't do one now, that it would be a couple of weeks before another one would come out, because I'm just about to go into a 10-day retreat starting on Friday. So here we are.
Cool. And, maybe we'll talk a bit about retreats.
Yeah, good opportunity to
the benefits,
discuss
the power, the
that.
particularities of retreats on the spiritual path.
Yeah.
Because you've been doing these online intensives and retreats for, I don't know, how many years? 3 years? 4 years? That's 3 years now.
Yeah, 2020 I started doing them.
Yeah.
I think it was May 2020 was the first time. So yeah, gosh, 3 years. That happened.
I know. So you've done a few now. You've done, I don't know, a dozen or more? More, probably.
Oh, more at this point, I think.
Yeah.
But this one coming up is the longest one I've ever done. I typically have been doing 2 7-day ones a year.
Mm-hmm.
One in July-ish and one in sort of beginning, end of year. But yeah, just sort of listening to people's feedback, and also a sort of an inclination in my own heart that a longer retreat would be a nice thing. So here we are doing a 10-day retreat.
Which is quite intense for you, actually, because you're given a lot of divine light transmissions, several a day, plus daily satsang.
Yeah.
Satsang. I sound like I don't know if you ever saw. There's a clip of Tom Hanks. There's a complete digression. Tom Hanks sitting on the Graham Norton show, and he's being asked, "Where did you get the voice for Forrest Gump?" And he said that they'd found this boy who played the young Forrest. And look, it's going to be the director and producer. It's going to be really hard work to get this guy to talk the way you want. And Tom Hanks said, "Well, I'll go meet him, and I'll see what his voice is like." And he was from like the deep South, Mississippi or something. And he was just this innocent little kid, but it cracked me up because he said he had this way of hardening his G's. So. What did you just say that triggered me there?
Satsang?
Satsang. So he was like, I do satsang. And he just gets really hard G. And Tom Hanks would say, "Hey, what do your parents do? Yeah, my daddy makes grease." You can use grease in all sorts of things. But when I said satsang, sounded like a little young Forrest Gump. Bless his heart. That was a digression. Apologise to all listening. Anyway, so you're going to do every day.
Yeah.
Many transmissions and
4 transmissions
a day.
Yeah.
So what? 4 transmissions a day and a satsang at some point in the afternoon.
Yeah. So yeah, 4 transmissions, 1 satsang. Yeah, and I think retreats generally provide quite an interesting opportunity. I think it's probably obvious to everyone listening that we're both advocates of meditation. It's been part of our path, formal meditation, let's call it, where you effectively create a sort of a sandbox where you push all of outside worldly considerations to the side for a certain amount of time a day. And the attention and intention and focus is an inward endeavor.
Yeah.
And the value of that, actually.
Yeah.
for all of life, the value of that. But retreats are like that on steroids.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, you're setting aside an intensive time, whether that be a single day or many days in the case of a retreat that I give. And it definitely offers up several different ways in which that can be helpful, I feel. One is the extended inward stroke. But two, for me, it really reveals what is there, because the non-distraction of the daily life, let's say, when that's all sort of set aside, it really reveals, and that can be quite an uncomfortable process. I see it time and time again with the people that turn up to these retreats, the uncomfortable stuff that is left,
Right.
that we normally don't actually get to meet so overtly, because it is covered,
Distracted from,
there we
avoided
go.
even.
That's a better way of putting
I mean,
it.
life's a big distraction, and we talked about this issue of or this idea of being more in a contemplative mode.
Yeah.
You know, as a lifestyle. You know, that's the full. You know, that being a monk, being a contemplative, being all that is definitely a mode of being, and that's the.
Yeah.
But you know, for people who live their lives, they're on the spiritual path.
Yeah, but they might have families and jobs.
Yeah, no,
and,
exactly.
and
It's all part
friends
of it.
and family and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
That is, you know, part of being human.
So taking those times to have an extended period that shows, as you say, shows what's there when you're not distracted.
Yeah.
And you know, the different aspects of that, right? You're talking about the things that come up, you know, the preoccupations, the mental, you know, dynamics, the things you get caught up on, things that are bothering you, the feelings, your resistance to the present moment.
Yeah. When everything else that gets everything gets cleared, the table gets cleared of all the distractions, you really get to see those dynamics, because there's nothing apart from your own relationship to life. There's nothing else to stick to hold on to. So it becomes very, the volume of that gets turned up, I guess, in the silence of being.
Yeah.
The volume of all these dynamics and these relationships and these beliefs and these conceptions and these ideas of life, they have nothing to, there's no outward projection to attach to. So it really does bring a lot up, I find.
Someone quoted, and I can't remember who it was, but said that all the problems in the world come down to the fact that most people can't sit in a room on their own for 5 minutes.
Yeah, huge.
You know, the inability to sit with oneself is a great barrier to.
Yeah, I see that a lot.
Peace, joy.
I see that a lot in life. Obviously, lucky to work with a lot of people who are comfortable to sit in that silence, but not everyone is. And also,
well, you're learning to, right? I mean, the opportunity there is to have a retreat. They get the opportunity to come to more peace with that moment.
Yeah. And actually really sinking into that silence and including all the stuff that is coming up, noticing that there is space, there is room. It's not, you're not a traffic cop that needs to manage all this stuff. There's the ego there. And actually that the silence of being, the presence that we are, has room for all this to come up. And you know, what I often see in people is there's this sense they can feel of like, oh, I'm overwhelmed by what's coming up. And to me, that's always an indicator that you need to go deeper. You need to find a deeper ground that holds even that overwhelm. And this is what retreats are so beautiful to do, is it's like in the group energy of that retreat, the satsang field of that retreat, and it is a bubble. I feel like even before the retreat starts, there's this bubble, this energy that I feel. And I can feel it now today. We're a couple of days out from the retreat. I've been feeling it. It's like there's this bubble that sort of
starting to inflate, starting to establish itself. Yeah,
it's a space of holding, and it's like in that space there everything is held, and it really spotlights the fact that everything is held.
Yeah,
there's no need to avoid. Even the overwhelm is held.
Yeah,
even the sense of me is held. All of it is held in a deeper ground.
Right. It's beautiful. I mean, we've both have. You've been running these retreats. We both participated in them in our time also.
Yeah.
Different kinds of retreats. And I've often found, I mean, for me, the first retreat I did was just a weekend way back when, about a year or two after learning to meditate the first time and been daily practicing. And it was, and I was having a great time with daily practice. It was, transformative from the outset. But I remember there was a retreat on, and I hadn't done anything like that. I thought, okay. I mean, I spent a little time in a Buddhist monastery as such, but I was so distracted by my own inability to settle into myself at that time that I didn't really take as much as I could have. But anyway,
that was before you had a meditation.
That was before I had a practice. Yeah, before I learned to meditate. But yeah, I remember it was next level. I remember I got there and the TM retreat was, you do extra meditation, you'd do a little pranayama, you do some asanas, and then you'll rest. And, they would do cycles of that. They were called rounds. And so you were constantly cycling these sort of deeper, preparing the body for the inward stroke and then taking that stroke, settling into the self, and then taking some rest afterwards, and then you'd start the whole cycle again. But after, I think it started on a Friday evening, but by Saturday afternoon, I was just, I was sitting in a field. It was in the summer, I think, and I was sitting in kind of a field, a little grassy knoll outside, and I was just spaced out, checking out the daisies, going, wow, it's really, and somehow it opened something deeper, richer, more pervasive up that the practice hadn't quite, the daily, practice hadn't quite touched on, and it wasn't just an experience. It did open me up to something more rich, a richer experience of my own being. That sort of stayed with me, and that was just the first. I went, oh, and I saw, oh, this is a pervasive, much more pervasive, expanded, blissful quality that came from just sort of sandboxing a weekend.
Yeah,
putting all my concerns and domestic considerations down and just having this deeper experience of.
They have a rhythm to them, these retreats, I find. And, obviously I haven't done a 10-day one, so we'll see what the rhythm of that is. But, whether you do a 3-day one or a 5-day one or a 7-day one or even one single day one, there's a sort of a rhythm that I notice. The first part of the rhythm is really the journey beyond the daily considerations of life. So it's sort of it's a sinking into the depths.
It takes a minute to settle down out of that outward moded life.
Yeah, it does. And then and again, it's different depending on the length of these retreats. But so once there's that settling that has happened, then there tends to be a sort of a kicking up of the dust of the depths. So stuff starts to come up, you know, patterns and behaviors and traumas and stresses and all the rest of it starts to come up, and there's a sort of a grumbling that can happen in there, an uncomfortableness, and as that stuff sort of starts to get released and met, then there comes the sort of the enjoyment, the bliss, the sinking into, the surrendering. So there can be a bit of resistance to start with, and then there's when that resistance is met or worked through, then there is this sort of expansion that happens. And obviously everyone has their own relationship with that and what that feels like and looks like, but yeah, it's both. Yes, this inward stroke allows for that stuff to come up and out as well.
You know, there's the two aspects. There's the purification, but also there's the establishing into the bliss of being.
Yeah.
You know, what's underneath all that. What you once you've released, noticed, released, traversed, even.
Yeah. But it's both at the same time.
It's both at the same time.
It's both at the same time. I mean, I see that with the transmissions. Is like, it is on one stroke, it is the turning up the volume of awareness. So the deepening into beingness, the transcendence. And on the other stroke, it is the clearing of the veils to that, or the clearing of the densities or the energetic blockages of that. And you know, a balancing of the systems and all that. So there are these two aspects there, and they're not separate. They're not one or the other either. It is both.
So I find something that comes to mind now is we've both had very different experiences, our own experiences around retreats and long withdrawals, let's say. And it's interesting to come back to this notion of the non-doing of it, and the symptomatic nature of, or the or participating in a retreat is the outward sign of an inward grace, right? To quote Augustine. And what I noticed when I was participating in these various sort of retreats or these kind of things in the past was I would notice that before it even began, things started to work out. Once it was clear I was intending that, or that was on the horizon, a few days, weeks, whatever, things within me would start to stir, change, arise, before you're even in on the course, before the meditations or the transmissions, before all that was happening. There's this spiritual transformation and purification would be starting to happen.
Sets in.
We used to call it, back when we used to call it a pre-course unstressing would be one of them, but you know, equally it would be pre-course bliss, pre-retreat bliss.
Yeah, I have many people describe these things to me over the years. I myself have experienced that over the years. I've even had people experience it before sessions, before they've described, you know, it's almost like their body, their system knew there was a session tomorrow, and the work had already begun, the feeling of the transmission had already begun within them, which to me just beautifully points to the fact that this is not a transmission that I, Imogen, are bestowing or giving to you, whoever you is, but it's just an enlivening or an activation or an attunement to that which is already there, always.
Well, it's both and, isn't it? I think, you know, we're all playing our roles in this beautiful spiritual unfolding. Yeah, so that was always interesting to notice. And in fact, it was that phenomena that for me was another nail in the coffin of doership for me, because seeing that. So from a certain perspective, you could say meditation, we talked about this, you could say meditation causes or brings about higher states of consciousness. You could say something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or transmission brings about, higher states of consciousness. But when I saw that some of the studies that were done on things like crime rates with large groups of meditators, something like local crime rates, different things, hospital admissions, they did big studies on this kind of stuff to see what was the effect of having a large group of meditators all meditating together for an extended period of time. As I sort of had a cursory look at the data, and I saw, hold on a minute, a few days before it already started to move, like the results were already coming in, that things were improving. And whether that's legit or not, I take it at its word, but it opened up that little box in my mind that said, hold on a minute, what's going on here then? Because if the effect precedes the cause, what's going on?
Well, it's the same as those studies they've done where they take a participant and they give them an MRI or one of these things, I don't know, CT, or whichever one it is, and they ask the participant of the study to raise their left or their right hand, and they can predict with a very, very high percentage certainty of which one it's going to be, because the MRI or whatever, the scan reveals the decision. Let's say we call it a decision, but they reveal what's going to happen before
the mind sort of says,
hold
I'm
of it.
going to do this.
Exactly.
And you think that's when you're making the decision, but that decision's already decision quotes has been made already.
Yeah, so it's already in the field.
Yeah.
The action is already in the field, and the mind comes in and
claims it.
Yeah. After the fact often, but maybe not after the fact in terms of our awareness of it.
Yeah. Meaning it's outside of any notion of conscious control. It's already occurring. It's already happening before the mind says, I'm going to do this now. It's just not.
It's a little bit, that I think of like the first retreat that I went on with Ajay Shanti.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember that, even just prior to that morning of the retreat,
that was a great case in point.
Yeah, having a massive sort of shift in consciousness happen right that morning before the retreat had started.
Yeah, it was a profound shift.
It was a
into
profound
non-duality
shift
at that point for a day or two.
And it's like, to someone else, you tell that story and it's like, what are the chances?
Yeah.
But to me, knowing what I do now, and also what I did then even, it's no great surprise.
No.
It's like life preparing the ground.
Yeah, it's all just, and that's what I find so beautiful about a certain point in the spiritual path, in the path of the seeker, the spiritual aspirant, whatever you want to call ourselves. There's a certain point where it turns away from, or it's revealed to be less about the fact that our actions and aspirations are leading to certain results and we are doing it, but that at every step it is, we're being, let's say, carried by grace, or we're being led, or we're being moved, guided. And that, I love that for, what we seek is seeking us.
Yeah.
And, I find that very, it's a relief. In fact, because the idea about non-doership or no free will and all those ideas for some can feel very disabling, demoralizing, frustrating. But the deeper part of that is this knowledge and trust and recognition that we're being carried all the time. It's a space of our own being. It's our own self that is orchestrating it all. But it's happening despite
stories of
the
it.
stories of the small self. And so, taking something like heading towards a retreat, it just there's this sense of being carried forward and into a bigger space of
Well, you
being.
wouldn't even be inclined to sit and do a retreat.
No.
Most people aren't. I mean,
No.
most of the world's population aren't necessarily inclined towards that kind of thing. But those that are, there's a ripeness there, there's a readiness there. And to me, it's a readiness and a ripeness to meet oneself.
Yeah.
All aspects of oneself, actually. And so whatever happens within the retreat field is that satsang, is that meeting of oneself, is that revealing of one's nature and deepening into oneself, deepening into the truth of being.
I like, I think you wrote once a piece called I Am Not a Safe Space. Did you write that? Did you publish that?
I did.
You did. And so I can't remember exactly what you wrote there.
It's funny you should say that.
So,
because I actually noted it down a few weeks ago, and I have it here.
Okay.
Well, but anyway, carry on. What were you going to say?
Unpack it a little bit.
Yeah.
That something like a retreat is both a safe space and an unsafe space.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what that means for me is that spiritual inquiry is not a safe space for an ego.
No.
So if you're seeking a safe space as a person, it's not safe because it's going to ultimately undermine and so much of what we take to be true that is false.
Yeah.
But the beauty of let's say a retreat is that you're establishing a safe space.
Yeah, and that's the ground of being.
For that unsafeness to be unpacked, explored. So it's both a safe space for the self and an unsafe space for the afflictive ego, to be fair. So it's not safe for the afflictive ego. So I like that beautiful idea that the safety. What do you want to be safe? Do you want to find the ground, or do you want to protect an ego that afflicts? So I really see, but I would say that the retreat in this sense, a retreat is the establishment in the same way as on a more micro scale, as you said earlier. A meditation is a microcosm of that. This is just sort of meditation writ large as an opportunity. So I just see that establishing a collective safe space was really a beautiful thing.
Can I read that poem?
Yeah,
actually?
go for
It's
it.
just I happen to have it here. It is a poem, yeah. Okay. Not a safe space. This is not a safe space. I am not a safe space. If safe space to you means that you will not be challenged and that you cannot challenge me, then I am not a safe space. I want to fully lean into life and have no stone unturned, no sacred cows that cannot be found. To me, the only way to deal with this life is to learn how to live it without a safe space, to learn to live it without the need to avoid, to meet everything in every moment fully. I'd rather meet and be met than avoid. No matter how painful, how raw, I'd rather live in openness, not closedness. So if I offer a safe space, it is the space where anything can be explored, anything can be embraced with compassion and tenderness. But especially those things that trigger us, because how can you expect those triggers to ever be healed if you're not willing to go there, to look at them? They will forever be in the corner of your existence, just there, within reaching distance, never far away, leaving you with an ever-present sense of insecurity and danger. So to me, a safe space is one where there is no walls, there is no ceiling, there is no ground, there is nothing to hide behind. Anything and everything can and does show up. There's room for it all, and so I offer a space with room for it all. I spent plenty of time in my life avoiding my trauma and triggers, my hurt, my conditioning, and my precious concepts. I've learnt that this only causes tightness and suffering, the opposite of freedom. It was when I learnt to meet all of my unexplored pains and traumas that I was able to be free of them. So that now that they can now they can show up. They can be there, and it's okay. I have the facility and the sufficient openness and vastness to meet them and not be afraid. In some ways, I'm feeling life more fully, more intensely, and with a rawness that was never there. And that's not because I avoided or stayed in my sandbox, my safety. It was because I blasted those doors open, no matter how painful, how scared, how vulnerable that was. I live in perpetual shaky, unstable ground. But it's in that instability that I find my true stability, that I find that I need no stability, that I need no ground. This is my groundedness. So if we're talking the same language of exploration, then yes, I offer you a safe space.
Nice. That's great. That's exactly it. Yeah.
And that's the retreat for me.
The safe space.
Yeah.
To explore, to release.
Yeah. That's what self-inquiry is as well.
Absolutely.
It's not an avoidance of exploration. And it reminds me of the conversation we had yesterday or the day before, I can't remember now, about the fact that truth needs no protection. That actually that which needs protection is trying to stay contained within its own viewpoint. And actually, if it's truly true, it can be poked and prodded and come at from any different direction, and it still remains. And this is a perfect sort of viewpoint of the ego, is it's not true.
No.
And that's why there's so much protection that's needed of an ego.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's always interesting to me when we need to shut down around something.
Mm-hmm.
When there's that energy of shutting down around something, it's like, well, what is there? What is being protected? Why is it being protected there?
It's funny because it reminds me of a time not long before I sort of shifted that. I used to think of myself, we talked about it as well, I was like an emotional or an existential pinball machine, right? That there was so many, like you shoot the ball up and it bounces with those little mushrooms, bing, 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 bing. And my inner landscape, and ultimately my outer one, therefore, was strewn with these reactive mushroom things, so if the ball of attention would hit it, go bing and scatter it off somewhere else, and you just. And what's interesting is that you can go through life not really knowing that fully. You can be sort of somewhat unconscious about it.
Yeah.
Because you can get very skillful at avoiding the reactivities.
Yeah.
But as life goes on, you build up more and more. The ego has more and more to protect itself from, self-image and whatnot.
Life gets tighter then.
Life gets tighter and tighter. So you can kind of live your life skirting these little things. On once in a while, you bump into one, it'll flare up.
Yeah.
But you get very good at walking the narrow path between these reactive things. But ultimately, your life shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And there's so much less of it that you're actually living because you're avoiding so much because
Mhm.
you're self-protecting something, you know. And I think what shifted was something like realizing that these little reactive points of pain weren't fixed. They were there, but if you met them and allowed that arising to occur
Mhm.
and held space for it,
Mhm.
it would dissolve.
Yeah.
Or even if it didn't dissolve, it would lessen because you're holding the space for it.
Yeah. There wasn't
And
the
it would
same resistance.
and it would integrate with the rest of the field of your own being. And so by meeting it with awareness and then allowing that energetic reactivity to be, well, and ultimately release, settle, change.
As it always does.
As it always does. And sometimes if it's deep trauma, it can take a while.
Yeah,
It can take
yeah.
a while, repeated exposure, but trauma isn't, necessarily permanent. And that's the thing. And so these strong emotional reactivities that were in my system, by that of bringing awareness, bringing space to it, allowing it to be, and then allowing it to sort of disperse into the greater field of being, I became less held hostage by
Yeah.
it. And that's freedom. That anything can arise then without the necessity to bounce straight off it, get away from it. And then that stays in place. But that area of life that triggers that has to be avoided at all
It's
costs.
like I love that word, anti-fragility. I think it was you that first sort of introduced me to that concept quite a few years ago now.
Yeah.
And it's a really beautiful one because it's not just so avoiding things, you become more and more fragile to life, but actually learning how to meet and walk through what is coming up for you is has actually the opposite of effect of fragility. Is such a strengthening act. It's such an anti-fragile act of life.
That which, I'm trying to think of the right phrase of it. Well, it's that the idea. The one idea is that which doesn't kill you makes you weaker.
Well, I've always heard that which doesn't kill you makes you
No, it
stronger.
is, but that's become the go-to for a certain cultural theme at the moment, that we need to avoid and continue to avoid those things that trigger us.
Yeah.
So that, the Nietzschean is that which does not kill you makes you stronger, and that's a kind of an anti-fragile idea.
Yeah, I think, but again, if we talk about it in terms of the deeper ground that holds the safety of it, because otherwise, without that deeper ground, it can be even more detrimental.
I'm not advocating. The idea is that which kills you, that which doesn't kill you makes you strong. There's the idea. It's been the antithesis to that has become an idea that's taken some traction, that it's going to make you weaker. But what you're talking about is no. It's like it will promote growth, to being exposed and facing.
Yeah, but I would say it's not just a question of that which doesn't kill you makes you go stronger. I think it has to be held in a deeper ground of safety. And that's what I mean, is it? Because actually, if it's not held in that deeper context, then just being exposed to this stuff without that deeper ground, it can be detrimental, can be more detrimental, can be more traumatic, re-traumatizing, these kind of things. So I think that's, to me, that's the context of it, is that, to face that which is very painful and hard to meet, it can only be really truly done when there is a deeper ground of holding found, a deeper space of stability that is not about the thing in itself, but actually is transcendent to that
in one's own nature, and
Exactly.
and that's sort of modeled through something like, you have, through self-inquiring, you get into a session with someone, and like you'll sit with people, I will, and the idea is that you're in a sense modeling that openness by your very being, so that allows someone else to, I mean, it's in some sense it's a, it's a well established sort of clinical sort of thing that I mean, Jung, I was talking about this the other day. Jung was talking about, and it's slightly different, but he talks about how, as a doctor in his case, you would have someone who would come to you, who you might find absolutely morally abhorrent, but in order to, if you're serious about healing, let's say in this case, psychologically in his case,
or supporting their healing,
I mean, Jung was a deeply spiritual man, so we're kind of talking about the same kind of thing. You have to find your place of non-judgment,
big time,
in regard to that, as the one who is sitting there helping them facilitate their own healing. But without that safe space is non-judgment. Even though on the surface you might go, my God, this is a horrifying, criminal, deviant, whatever. But what that was so beautiful about it was Jung was talking about this as a principle, that you have to find your own, deepest non-judgment. But in doing so, without it, you as a facilitator or a guide can't give what's needed, which is the space. And so giving that space is just such a great gift, but it's also about you doing that work yourself and being able to give that space, because if they're not meeting your resistances, because they're not there, or at least you have your way of dealing and holding your space for yourself also.
Well, exactly. I think that space is directly correlated with if you can meet yourself in that space. Like if there's places where I can't go, for instance, in my own like being, where it's too much, it's too triggering, it's too all of these kinds of descriptions. Then how on earth?
How would you be able to
be able to hold someone else in what they're going through? So, this, I mean, it's a constant doing the work. Again, we get into the non-doership. Let's say a better way of describing it for me anyway is the work is constantly being done of meeting.
And that constantly aspects. Blossoming, opening up constantly in your being. That's what you're trying to model and promote.
Constantly moving into that which is showing up, moving into going beyond and including that which is showing up. And it's not for the faint-hearted.
It's not for the faint-hearted, but also there gets to a point though that for me anyway, in my path, and I've said and written about this before, that we only really wake up in any deep sense when everything else has sort of failed, when all the other strategies of avoidance, denial, suppression, when those finally become untenable, then maybe you're willing to open up and do the work and allow grace to move in you, even though, again, all this is a non-doing thing. It's how it unfolds.
For some, that work is prior to awakening. For some, that work is post-awakening. I've seen both happen, to be honest.
True.
Yeah, I certainly was brought up with the view that you purify the mind and the body, and then awakening happens.
Yeah, and enlightenment is the result of being
it's
clear,
a final
but
point.
No.
And that may well be true for some. It is. I've worked with people that is actually the case, but I've worked with many more that isn't the case, and I put myself in that category.
Yeah, me too.
But I would say what you're speaking of, and correct me if I'm barking up the wrong tree here, but I feel what you're saying is that there is a certain amount of surrender that is needed.
Yes.
A recognition of this is not about the ego awakening.
Well, all right. So it's like this, that the ego, let's call it ego death for want of a better word, but it's discovery of large self.
Yeah.
The ego is not going to voluntarily walk the plank of its own destruction.
No.
Right. It's pretty bloody desperate before, the ego's going to want to kind of let the fist open and let life flow through it. And in doing so, the falseness of its reality is sort of seen through by the egos are kind of can act like a gatekeeper to the deep true self. It's like it does not want to. It's funny talking about the ego as
an entity, almost,
entity,
but it's not.
Let's do it anyway. But so, I've seen it often enough that, when faced with difficult truths regarding self-nature, the ego just does not want to go there. The ego mind just will really, if they're not ready for it, if they haven't reached that point where, it feels it can maintain control, it's just not going to want to go there. You see that resistance come up. The ego doesn't want to look there. Doesn't want to accept that reality. Doesn't even want to look at the reality of its own vulnerable.
Yeah. And all sorts of things can happen, from falling asleep to attack to stones in the bushes to all sorts of things can happen. Yeah,
exactly.
And I saw that in my own path. That being was. I think it's part of everyone's path.
Absolutely. But they get to a certain point where
those strategies don't work.
They
anymore.
all fail, and that's a blessed day when everything fails.
But it can feel very painful to that which we call the ego.
Yeah.
As the seat of identity shifts.
Yeah.
Because the implications of that reach far and wide.
Yeah.
And in a sense, life is never the same.
Yes. Never the same.
It's like a recognition of, I'm dreaming. When you were just in the dream, not realizing you were dreaming, and then there's that lucidity, that awareness of, this is a dream. It changes everything, and yet the dream still continues.
Right. That's it. Yes, you wake up to the dream that is reality, that we call reality, but the dream continues. Yeah. But you're awake in the dream. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
In many ways.
And ironically, to an ego, to a mind believing it's a self as that only, it kind of questions whether it could be that simple. And yet the truth is the simplest of simplicities.
I think there's a real value. And so, awakening is so different for so many different people. Sometimes it's absolutely spontaneous out of nowhere. But sometimes it's sometimes it arrives in the wake of a spiritual shock. We might call, could be a tragic event, could be just a life changing, out of the blue that makes one question. It could be, through years and years of
slow, gentle
practice,
unfolding. Yeah,
exactly.
And everything in between.
Yeah, and in a sense, my path was long. It wasn't sudden, but at the end it was. But then I love that analogy. The analogy, it's like it's always sudden at the end. It's like a band that's a breakthrough band. They came out of nowhere, but they've been working in pubs for the last 20 years. Working at it, and then suddenly go, hey, this is a new band, and they've been, because they hit the awakenings a bit like that. often, as a result of, or rather, it unfolds through many years of spiritual practice. But so for me, one of the great, and it's not, I've noticed that it's not such a prominent thing for some people, is the very nature of consciousness thing of it. That this is literally, I say literally, because I don't mean it as a figuratively. It's dreamlike. Mm-hmm. This is appearances in consciousness.
Yeah. That we take to be solid.
That we take to be solid, but it's a present moment, multi-sensory, multi-dimensional, kaleidoscopic light show.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a trip. It is a trip.
And waking up from that dream is waking up from the belief in the person, the mind, body person. Waking up to the recognition of, I am, whatever you want to call it, consciousness, divine.
I am.
Awareness.
Yeah. I'm an unbounded, formless field of awareness.
That's what I am.
Yeah. And therefore, actually, all of this is that too.
Yeah.
There's no separation between it. So there's an unbroken continuum from silence through to complete dynamism.
Yeah.
There's only one singular without a second. So yeah, it's a trip when you realize, it's a dream, or rather, it's a dream. It's one way of putting it. I kind of prefer something like it's dreamlike in nature. Put it that way, because I don't want to. It's not so easy. I don't like to so easy dismiss.
Well, that's what does happen
reality.
Is when there are some teachers or teachings that talk about it's a dream, and that as a way of negation or dismissal of the dream.
Yeah.
And really it's to say that it's a dream, i.e. it's a temporary arising.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean...
And it's of the nature of consciousness, mind awareness.
Doesn't mean that you don't stub your toe and it hurts.
And it doesn't... But also, I think there's a sort of a sacred nature that emerges from the heart upon awakening, or that... dismiss.
Not
it's
actually
full of devotion and bliss and of this majesty. Well,
I would say that comes online, put it that way.
Yeah.
It can take some time to get to that recognition, the inclusion of it all. It can first feel a little empty and feel a little disconnected.
It can, yeah. For some.
The first stages, the nubile first steps into that recognition, it can feel quite empty in its way. But in time, it's like the inclusion of it all, the unity of it all is like, and it's certainly the way I would describe it, is that sacredness in the heart becomes very...
It's like an upswelling of love and devotion. And
because it is temporary, because this life that we call this dreamlike nature of life is so fleeting, is so temporary, is such an ineffable experience of life that actually it makes it all the more precious, all the more sacred. That, I'm not just talking about the good stuff, I'm talking about all of it. Yeah. All of it is life's light show.
Yeah. And it's, if you take it on, this is the nihilistic view. Life is temporary, life is fleeting. It's worthless and meaningless.
Yeah.
But what the problem philosophically with that and experientially is that you're still focused on the relative nature of it, the relative aspect of it, alone. Mm-hmm. And so taken alone, you go, well, yeah, sure. I mean, you can reach that conclusion. It's meaningless, it's fleeting, it's passing and impermanent. But this relative manifestation is just the dynamic manifestation of the wholeness of being, of this eternal, ever-present, infinitely intelligent, creative, bountiful reality.
And it is.
And it is, and here we are. And so, taken as a whole, whoa, it's just like this beautiful, like ever-changing work of art that's just ever, it just is miraculous. It's mysterious.
It is. I remember there was a really big turning point for me where I guess prior to this turning point, I must have subtly been rejecting some unpleasant things like grief, for instance. In this particular, I remember that I won't go into the detail of it, but
before or after?
No, this was sort of post awakening, but there was obviously still some subtle concept of rejection of grief, I guess.
Right.
And I remember that I remember this turning point. Obviously, it had been coming over time, but I remember having that conscious thought of, wow, this grief is actually incredibly beautiful. Wow, the love that is in this grief. And from that point, never rejecting grief.
Right.
Whereas before, obviously, my conditioning had very much rejected that kind of grief until we had an event in our life where that couldn't be rejected. And this was, a couple of years before sort of an abiding awakening had come about. But it's like life. I couldn't reject that grief anymore. But there was still some leftover vestiges of trying to reject that grief. So I remember the moment where grief was no longer rejected and actually let fully into my heart. And all I found underneath that grief was love.
Right.
But it's like, while I still had that conceptual overlay that grief equals bad, grief equals pain, equals suffering, I actually couldn't find the underlying fabric of what that grief was, which was love.
Right.
And so it's like, actually, I have found time and time again, much to my surprise, conceptually at least, that the very things in life I've avoided are the very things in life that hold the most profound lessons of love in them. And that has led me down a path of inclusion, I would say.
Yeah.
Rather than a path of negation.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and that points to something here that was so, and I think it was really important for us, particularly in the first couple of years or few years, well, to this day really, about awakening, that the idea that you're going to get to non-dual awakening, and all the work has been done.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Right? That's it.
That's
in
a
fact,
massive idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
a false idea. I want to just put that out there.
It's completely false.
If you think that that's what's going to happen, then you're going for a rude awakening.
Absolutely.
I certainly was.
Well, you experienced, I experienced, and so many people we know, so many people we've worked with. There's the difference is that I would say before awakening, you're doing the work kind of thing, right?
You're a person doing the work.
You're a person doing the work.
A mind, body, inner world, connected to other people, yes.
Yes.
But separate fundamentally somehow.
And there's a blurry area, so to speak, where the ideas of doing and non-doing and person and non-person are sort of cohabit for a little while. But then you're into the non-dual space, and it's clear, there's no person here doing the work. Yeah. But the work continues.
Yeah.
And of what? Of continued deepening, continued transformation.
Yeah. The unveiling of concepts that occlude one from the fullness of,
there are residual pockets, I would say, or layers or strata of densities of stuff that will continue to bubble up and release, need to be faced.
Yeah.
The difference is you're not doing it.
Yeah,
well, there's no one doing it, even though, I talk in first person pronouns. It's not like I'm going to go, this person here, or rather this one here.
Oh, we've went through that phase.
It is felt here.
Yeah.
Just use your first person pronouns, I, but the thing is, the I you're referring to isn't the person, it's the self. Okay. But the point is that, there's going to be a lot of reordering, restructuring post awakening, because our whole body mind is constructed for, for the large part of our lives, I say pre-awakening, out of egoic matter, let's say. It's lots of strategies of conditioning, avoidance, and whatnot. We're just a mess. We are.
There's a lot of beliefs in there.
There's a lot of beliefs, a lot of false ideas, a lot of strategies of avoidance and self-protection.
Well, it's all based on identity.
Right. And we'll see, you can see how our beliefs and thoughts affect our body, something as gross as a body. If you see someone who believes, just hypothetically, thought experiment, someone who believes that, who truly believes around every corner that someone's going to jump out and murder them, the tension that would create in the body
has a physiological
effect. It'll change the way they look, their face, their alertness. And you sustain a single idea like that for long enough, and it will change your musculature, it'll change your bone structure and everything. And I've seen people in session through the work find, like stern, tight faces, and you'll introduce them to their self, the non-conceptual self. For a moment, they'll glimpse it, open up, and you'll just see the face go, and the shoulders.
Well, I would say that was the case with you, actually.
Right.
People used to describe you, and I would describe you as slightly tortured looking. I for the most part, wouldn't describe that of you.
No,
right now.
I do look back. Actually, I've looked back at some photographs from those, the last couple of years before I awakened, and I go, oh yeah, I see it now. Oh yeah.
One of our good close friends, actually, we came back to America, and one of our close friends, that was one of the first things he said.
Yeah, I was like, what?
You look much less tortured.
That tortured look you had is gone, and I was like, there's a bit of sorry. I had a tortured look. Oh yeah, but so. The point is that when that's released, from the grip of the idea of personhood and self and ego, because that's the big idea. That's the block at the very bottom of the Jenga. You pull that one out.
The root cause of
all the other afflictions. So you pull that one out, the whole thing, the house of cards. But it takes a while for it to happen.
It does, gosh,
and so the body is going to release, reorder. And so my feeling was that this process that was happening was that, okay, suddenly I'm aware of awareness that I am. And there's the awakening. There's the non-small self being that I am, and that's in the broadest, most abstract existential reality. But there's all these layers
there's
of,
the embodiment
and it is
that
a dream, but it's the embodiment of that recognition. We can't just dismiss it as a dream, because that recognition has to work its way through all the layers and structures of what we are as an embodied being.
And also what I would say is unexplored assumptions. Those look
there's
like
still
often,
some, there's going to be some left.
There's often a lot of unexplored assumptions that while the ground has shifted from underneath you, the ground of identity of who and what you think you are may have shifted to the broader perspective of I am consciousness. There can be at least left over unexplored assumptions of life it's almost like you have an unexplored assumption about a particular thing, belief, and there's a thicket of views that are built based on that unexplored assumption. And so, often the work I see with people post-awakening is while they've had a shift of identity, fundamental shift, there are still pockets that have yet to be explored, and therefore yet to be embodied in light of that.
Integrated, let's say, as
that's
well.
A good word, and so that process can take time, actually. It can take a lot of time for some people. I always use the analogy, which all sorts of people use this analogy, but it is a good analogy. It's the ceiling fan that has had its power cut, but it's still turning.
For a while.
Yeah.
Running out, running
And
down.
so that turning is like the wheels spinning of leftover vestiges of beliefs and assumptions, and loyalty to those particular beliefs and assumptions that hasn't yet been uprooted fully. And so while the fundamental shift of identity and therefore consciousness revealed as self is there, the embodiment and the lived reality of that may be still a little muddy.
I think there's a relearning though. It's not even a relearning; it's a new learning that
It's
has
like
to
learning
happen
to be the
about
butterfly versus the caterpillar.
Exactly, it is It is like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this new learning has to happen about how do I now move in relation to other people? How do I relate to, activities in the world? How do I, do
Relate
this?
to
How do I
doing.
do that? Relate to doing. What does that look like now? And so you haven't learnt them yet. It takes a while to bump into them and, straighten out. Okay, this is my natural flow now. This is the natural flow of this being moving in this regard. But of course, you can get things years after the event and because it's never come up, and then you realize, I've got some unresolved adjustments to make in regard to this kind of situation in life.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a maturing,
Definitely.
and an integration, embodiment, whatever we want to call it, but definitely a maturing that comes downstream of it all.
Yeah. And so while it may be a full stop in terms of identity,
Self-identity, yeah.
It's almost like a new chapter of that book. That new chapter is consciousness embodied as the human, and what that looks like and feels like and interacts like in the world.
Well, I would say one of the big broad strokes that sort of kicked in after a little while, took a little while, but for me to really notice it was love. Like, love started to just swell up as but also not just swell up, but recognizing it and experiencing it as the very fabric of what I am and what is.
That took a while to come online.
It took
for me.
a while, right?
For me, it was a while, because I think I personally was dealing with a lot of past trauma stuff that I had to wade through, which made it pretty uncomfortable for quite a while. I mean, we're talking a year or two for me. Before that love and that bliss, that genuine love of life was really prominent, I would say, for me.
Right.
I remember first few months it was there, but then it quite quickly disappeared, and I'm like, where's the love? Where's the bliss? Like, really, really confused, actually. There was a time where I was really genuinely like,
where's the bliss?
Hang on, what's going on here? But it was part of my process.
Part of your detox.
It was, and that was a hard time.
It was. I could see that. And all the while, there's this awakening to clarity and awakening to bliss in a sense. It can be quite heady at times, but then you have this,
thunderstorm coming through.
Big thunderstorm coming
That's
through.
what it felt like.
Definitely.
Weathering the storm. Genuinely, that's what it felt like. For quite a long time there, felt like a little turtle weathering the storm in its shell.
Well, I think that was it. I mean, I had that experience too. I'm reminded of these big. We lived in Iowa for a better part of a decade, and I loved the weather there. I loved the weather. It's crazy. It's not like the UK. The UK is all very moderate. It's extreme there.
Yeah, so, when you're in the UK and someone says a thunderstorm, it's like nah,
not so much.
Nah.
Or it's cold, not so much. So in the winter we'd have these kind of minus whatever it was. -20 or whatever it was. I don't know. I don't know if it's Fahrenheit or centigrade. Anyway, way below zero all the time.
To the point where your inside of your nostrils freezing.
Yeah,
when you
breathe.
step outside.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a strange.
But what I loved was the not in the winter, but I don't know, probably in summer even, or the other
summer
season,
thunderstorms.
when the storms would come through. And I remember we used to live just outside of town. Big, very flat fields overhead, and I got some great photographs of it. These storms, you would see clear skies, and then like the mothership coming in,
Independence
Day, and like just pouring underneath it, dark, would come through, and it would actually dominate the landscape for like an hour or two or whatever, and then just move off and leave the blue. And it was so bizarre, to watch that force of nature coming through with all its sort of vitality and violence, and then move off. Yeah. And so this was the experience sometimes post-awakening, when some...
And there was no resisting it anymore. There was no sort of ego mechanisms of resistance. And so it was like you're weathering the storm. It's coming through full force, full-bodied, raw experiencing without any...
filter
or analysis or anything. It's just, and it's a very bodily experience at that point. I think the mind saves us sometimes from some of that,
distracts us
by that analysis. We're actually almost like the body mechanism of the mind mechanism of almost the judgment of it can be a slight stepping back from the actual lived, embodied, somatic experience of it.
If it's something you don't feel you can endure or face.
Yeah, and so then there's an analysis of it, a judgment of it, and actually then you're in that rather than...
Removed yourself from it, just enough.
Subtly, very subtly.
That's a good point.
And so what I noticed was that was no longer really available, and if there was judgment, it was included in all of it. And so it was just...
I am the storm.
The fullness of that is coming through. There's no stopping it or wanting to stop it, and even if there is a wanting, that's part of the storm too.
But again, you're right, one of the characteristics of the awakened condition is that there's no one left that can adopt a position against or for. No strategy can truly be employed. They can emerge sometimes. A strategy can seem to emerge as a
relative strategy,
but it's not really. It's like you are. I saw a little clip by John Burney the other day, and I really liked what he said. And I'm probably going to butcher it, but he said something like, letting life flow through you, or letting life flow. It's like, what do you do with all this thing that's coming? You can there's resistance can show up in regard to it, but really it's about learning, finding the way to let it all flow. And once that is really done fully, let's say, once you've discovered what that is, to let life flow, you find that there's no one left of you. There's nothing left of you. There is just that flow. And so that was for me the experience too. Just this like sometimes like a devastating, afflictive, experiencing, but nowhere to run from it. But actually in that you realize, you by just simply weathering that, which is all you can do anyway, you recognize it as an intense version, or an intense arising, let's say.
It's intense, but it's not suffered in the same way, I would say. It's like, people often ask me, do you suffer? And my answer to that is, there can be a temporary, relative, what would be described as an experience of suffering, all held within a meta, I think meta's the right word there, a bigger picture of the non-suffering of even that which is arising. So it's like in the final truth of it, no, there's no suffering. On the relative human experience of life, sure, there can be, I don't like that, I like this, a preference, there can be a like, a dislike, there can be a seeming resistance to something even, but actually it's all in the bigger picture, in the true self, there is no resistance, even to the resistance.
Yes.
There's
no
suffering
two things
of
to
the suffering.
one can resist another.
Exactly. And so the suffering, the resistance, all of that just becomes the description of this temporary arising, or the dreamlike substance of nature.
I love that. I love that quote, and I'm gonna try to dig it out because it's one of my favorites, and it's from Rainer Maria Rilke. I'll see if I can find it.
You're having to turn on your internet.
No, I've got it. I've got it on.
We discovered what that does to the podcast a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah, that was a nightmare of editing.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the Rilke. It's just a short poem, and I love it. It's more of a quote, really. He said, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final."
Beautiful.
And I think I love Rilke. And that's the thing. No feeling is final. He's not saying, though, because sometimes this idea that this too shall pass is true, but it can be used as a bit of a bypass as well.
It can.
You're saying, "Oh, it's going to pass, so I just gotta
get through it.
Get through it, bear it, so you can remain your tension." But what he's saying, and what the real truth of it is, let it all in, let it all in, let it all in as it's happening. It isn't fine. Nothing is final. It will pass. It'll pass. It will change.
It's my favorite thing.
But don't avoid. We shall see.
It's like I've got a friend that we make constant joke about, that we need to get. She needs to get a T-shirt printed up with my saying, "We shall see." And it's not meant as a bypass. It's like any finality that you feel you have about a viewpoint of something that's happening. The only true response to that is, well, we'll see.
We shall see.
We'll see. We shall see.
Yeah.
Don't know. I think this is bad. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't know.
It's reserved judgment perpetually.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a radical a condition to
it is. It's a constant openness to life. The mind. It has this tendency, and what it does best is to define things and pin things down into certainty. And it's to live from the heart is to live from a constant state of unknowingness, openness.
Yeah.
To be constantly opening to life rather than closing down into the safety of certainty.
It's getting to be at home with ambiguity. Total, and it's what did Sung San call it? Only don't know. Yeah. But it's holding and becoming really kind of enjoying and settling into total ambiguity. Yeah. Just don't resolve it. Don't be tempted to resolve it.
Yeah. And in that,
because it's pointless, because we don't know.
It is pointless. And also in that, what you can feel when there's a feeling of need to find that certainty, you can actually feel the energetics of that. You can feel this sort of this closing down around. And I find what's helpful is if you're experiencing that in your life, which we all inevitably do, this sort of contraction of life, what you can notice is actually there is a deeper space of tender holding. Even that closing down, right? There can be an opening to even that, and that's the meta of it. Yeah. And so this is when I talk about there can be suffering or resistance on a surface level, and there's a deeper sense of non-resistance and non-suffering at a deeper level. And so you can actually feel that at play. You can feel the holding of that tightness,
which tends to, though, release the tightness.
Well, exactly. There's the paradox, the beautiful paradox of it all is actually, can you find the welcoming of even the tightness and the need for certainty, and in that welcoming, there's actually, you notice that there's room for both. First and foremost, you notice, okay, there's both here. There's both. There's a presence of both in effect. But also in that, there's not a holding on to one or the other. And actually, inevitably, life that arising of tightness dissolves back into where it came from, that openness.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I always look at this stuff on a felt sense rather than a thought sense, though, because the thought sense can be very distorted in its view, I think, whereas the felt sense is a much more innocent, direct, unambiguous recognition.
Well, I think that's where we have our trouble, actually, is in the felt sense. And, you know, that this idea of accepting what's arising, when we actually look back to where our resistance is, it's not that we're resisting situations. I'm using first person pronouns, we, doing, whatever. But it's not like the resistance is to a situation. It's the resistance is more likely to be around our feelings, our difficult feelings in regard to that situation or what's arising. And, you know, that's the thing. It's worth coming closer. So, this is happening in my life. And so there's this feeling of distress around, as you say, this is the mind, the idea that, this event is a problem, this thing that's happening is not wanted, whatever, and so the resistance seems to appear under those conditions. But if we pull ourselves back, really drop ourselves into our own experiencing, we realize, it's not actually this thing that's happening that someone said or did or what's occurring in the world. It's the feeling. That's what we're having trouble with, and that's the level. That's the felt sense you're talking about. Yeah. Drop into that felt sense and see if you can let that in.
Beyond the labels of that
beyond
felt
the labels,
sense.
beyond the labels, beyond the seeming causes
exactly,
of it.
And those labels set up a relationship of good and bad. Set up a relationship of yes, I want this, and no, I don't want that.
Splits the world in two.
When you are able to just be with what is, what that is a recognition of it. It is just an arising of life that is being felt and known and experienced in that moment. It's a temporary arising of life that is being felt, known, experienced in that moment. And actually that there is room for it.
Yeah.
There is always room for it. The only place where we feel there isn't room for it is our conceptions and ideas of space and time and who and what we are. That somehow we are a finite resource, a limited thing, a box, a body-shaped box that can only handle this thing so much. And actually, when we come to a deeper understanding of our nature that includes this, what I would call the body-shaped box, there are no such boundaries. There are no such limits.
Yeah. Ramana was his conception, I believe, and I go with it. The great, the idea that brings all the suffering is the I am the body idea.
Yeah.
You know, I am the body and not else and nothing else. You know, that leaves, if that's a belief, then that's such a vulnerable thicket.
Yeah, because it is a finite.
Because it is
experience.
finite. You know you're going to die.
Yeah.
You know your body can be injured, suffer disease, and all these different, afflictions, psychological.
And this is all true. On the level of the body can experience all these things.
But then you realize
we are not
that
the body.
We're not. The seat of our existence, our being, our true identity is consciousness itself.
That which is aware of the body.
We that which we are is aware of the body and includes as part of our expression.
Mm-hmm.
And that offers such a relief. I was talking about the face, that when someone glimpses that and realizes it, the relief that's felt throughout that body.
Mm-hmm.
The implications of it, the immediate energetic implications of that are often a great sense of relaxation, relief. rest, trust,
expansiveness.
and that's very blissful.
Yeah. I think this is a good spot to pause for today. And just to say, yeah, we won't be releasing one of these for a couple of weeks, probably, because my retreat starts Friday the 14th of July, runs till the 23rd. So it'll be after that we'll be doing another podcast.
And anyone who wants to join in on Imogen's retreat, check out her website, beyondimogen.com, for all the details.
Quick sales plug.
No, it's good.
But yeah, it's I really love these retreats. They're really wonderful to facilitate, but also participate in. I'm just as much a participant in this as everyone else, and it's really it's like to have that be the entire focus is a really special time, I find, for me. I go entirely on retreat as well.
I lose you for a week or more.
Like, well, 10 days now.
I make sure you're fed and watered and whatnot.
You keep me supplied. My body supplied with the things it needs. But yeah, I really I go into retreat and I savor those moments, because it is precious. It's not something that we are all afforded in life these days. Life can get very busy, very full of practicalities and sort of worldly attentions. And so these retreats are a real gift. I feel really honoured to be on them, and feel really sort of moved to share in this with a group, whoever turns up on the retreat, whether it's for one session or all the sessions. I feel like we're all in that retreat together, the bubble, retreat bubble, I call it. It's and all held so deeply in that by grace, by the divine. So I look forward to them every time. They inevitably bring up a lot as well for me.
It's beautiful. Okay, well, we'll see you all in a week or two.
Yeah.
More like 2. But bye for now.